Part 1. Psychology. Since the subject of our book is a political schism that threatens our social peace, the first issue we need to address is the human. The human who hates himself and his community. First, an anecdote from Chicago. During my tenure in Chicago in the 1990s, at a cocktail party, I started a conversation with an American academic who had just returned from Turkey and asked him about his impressions of our country. He said, "I'll tell you my sincere opinion, if it won't upset you," and continued, "Turks don't like each other." Given the atmosphere of schism in Turkish politics in 2023, such an observation seems so innocent. The most important element underlying the feeling of hatred is undoubtedly the psychology of the society still living in a period of transformation, from peasant life to a metropolitan, modern, Western lifestyle. The source of many problems is the feeling of inferiority and the yearning of the peasant new to the city to be embraced by the modern urban community. Such psychology requires the creation of the other. And for the educated new modernist peasant, the other is his very family and its values left back in the village. From peasant to urban, we may call the interim phase of transformation as a lumpenization process. Perhaps the most important loss in shifting to a materialist, modern lifestyle are two traditional Turkish Islamic values: compassion and mercy. In his war to success by any means, young metropolitan modernist youth would not even know what these two words mean. And without these two words, it seems hard to have inner peace and more, social harmony. That's why we put the psychology section first. Our basic question is, what is poisoning the political environment in Turkey? Is it our unquestioning, fanatic commitment to the lifestyles and values of the groups we belong to? Namely, religious and secular. Is it the conformism that Nietzsche draws attention to? The cowardice of being excommunicated from the group we belong to? What are the psychological reasons underlying the bigoted, stubborn loyalties in politics? With which motives is one a Kemalist, secularist, Westernist, modernist, CHP supporter? And with which motives is one AKP supporter, devout, conservative, or else liberal, leftist, pro-Sharia, etc.? Though I am not a psychologist and cannot claim to be one, I did a little homework reading the books of Abraham Harold Maslow, Alain de Botton, Alfred Adler, Carl Gustav Jung, Errol Goka, Errol Gungor, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martha Kotam, Nevzat Tarhan, Nur Vergin, Sigmund Freud, and Vamik Volkin. Encouraged by my readings, I made a humble try, daring to discuss the subject of human psychology. Individual psychology. Can we say two key components constitute human psychology? The first, the desire to be oneself, to be me, to be unique, and to be different from others. Let's call it fission, i.e., the need for dissociation. Turkish saying goes, if one does not like himself, he would burst of sorrow. Let's hear Friedrich Nietzsche. At present, it belongs to the conception of greatness to be noble, to wish to be apart, to be capable of being different, to stand alone, to have to live by personal initiative. We want to be ourselves, but who do we want to be? Let's remember the famous 13th century Turkish Sufi, Yunus Emre, and Socrates. Do we really know who we are, what we desire in life? Some of us go into an identity crisis through a certain awakening. A small, wise group overcomes the crisis and finds a calm soul and peace. Some leave the world without even having an identity crisis. Let's call them lazy souls without identity. Some even want to be someone else, spending their lives imitating others, and even think that they are someone other than themselves. Some brag about how many important acquaintances they have, trying to cure their weaknesses with the strength of others. Although we are in the age of ChatGPT, some are trying to gain respect by memorizing information in an effort to prove how much they know to their peers. Add to that the exhibitionism unleashed by social media. We have to consider this psychological background in the socio-political preferences of the creature we call human. Abraham Maslow considers self-esteem as one of the 5 most important needs on the scale of human vital needs, and emphasizes that its absence causes weakness, feelings of inferiority, and helplessness. Alain de Botton says in modern secular societies, a more miserable destiny cannot be imagined than being like everyone else. Mediocre people, those who cannot go beyond the general line of society, the mass of the people, and the boring people. However, the main purpose of an intelligent individual is to stand out from the crowd, and to stand out from society, as much as its abilities allow. In his works, Friedrich Nietzsche curses the herd spirit and deals with the ideas of difference, loneliness, freedom, and being oneself. The debate continues as to whether human values and behavior codes are innate or result from the environment. In fact, many psychologists and philosophers say that humans can't live outside of society, like many other animals, as we will explain in the fusion section. On the other hand, Nietzsche opposes this view, which he calls the herd spirit, with the thesis of Übermensch, superior man. He says that psychologically strong people should reject all values and create their own values, follow them, and even surpass themselves. He claims that one can very well live alone and free. Alfred Adler writes, "From the standpoint of humans' relationship to nature, human is an inadequate creature. Being human entails experiencing inadequacy and making an effort to achieve superiority." He also notes that this goal manifests itself under the guise of having authority over others and being more powerful and superior to them. Adler states that at the root of human values and behaviors, there is an inferiority complex arising from helplessness, insecurity, and anxiety that starts at the moment of birth, against the power of nature, and that whole life passes in search of the satisfaction of this feeling of inferiority. Furthermore, he asserts that this has reached the point where he hates society, those in power, and even himself. According to Nietzsche, who concurs with Adler, this burnout, this self-hatred, all this emanated from it with such strength that it became a new hindrance to it. Furthermore, Adler continues, we frequently hear from such people that their parents also have an aristocratic character. The tendency to believe that one is different from others comes from an extraordinary family, is endowed with excellent purpose and emotions, is born with privilege, and is superior to everyone else, is all that can be found behind this empty desire. There is isolation and fragmentation in the nature of modern values that claim to replace our values based on tradition, writes Professor Hayrettin Karaman about the issue of modern loneliness. Freud, on the other hand, explains that the individual behaves with the id, superego, and ego impulses. In other words, a healthy soul is content with itself and seeks to be who it truly is. How common is this in our society then? The main quest. Having discussed fission, now let's examine how personal psychological factors like inferiority complex, the need for love and esteem, narcissism, and the desire to dominate affect a person's social behavior and political preferences. Hence, continue with the disciplines of social psychology and political psychology. Social psychology. Fusion. As a human is a social being, now let us look into social psychology. Remember Aristotle, his coining the human as zoon politikon, political animal. Is social interaction of humans a genetic animal instinct? Can humans survive outside a human group? Alfred Adler starts with the first fear that all living things experience at birth. A child's understanding of life's challenges is so limited that he is helpless without others to support him and make up for what he lacks. A terrified person, starting with his mother, reaches out his hand to another. Try to grab it, pull it, and hold it there forever. That there are no absolutes, and the nearest to the absolute is social life. What we can call fusion, the need for attraction and recognition, or the desire to be part of a society, is a common nature in general. Except for powerful souls reaching a certain level, like Sufis and philosophers, ordinary humans excluded from society pay a very high price. Historical Anatolian dervish orders and religious fraternities used to serve as threads maintaining social group solidarity. Such a mission continues in modernity, as economic and social solidarity clubs. Remember, Maslow listed security, belonging, and love as social needs. University of Texas professor Kostika Bradaton says biological herd instinct in our brains ensures us a comfortable and trouble-free life, in harmony with society. However, when our minds begin to question the values of the group and go against our biological motives for fusion, problems arise. Nietzsche asserts, naturally, the strong tend to separate, and the weak tend to unite, emphasizing the value of isolation for the individual. According to Charles Mackay, humans are biologically wired with a herd instinct and herd logic. Their survival depends on this instinct, but as they awaken one at a time, they must learn to disperse from the herd. He says that biology and spirit are from different planets, and the only way to achieve spiritual integrity is by breaking away from the crowd. In this regard, the following lines of sociologist Nur Vergine are noteworthy. Hegel asserts that, in addition to wanting to satisfy their own hunger and need for survival, humans also need to fulfill the wishes of other people. A human is a being who desires and requires the company of others. The awareness of one's own distinct human identity depends on being acknowledged by others in the situation, because it is so crucial to the human experience. It's a phenomenon that makes a person human, but it's also a reality that enables it to identify, in essence, with himself as a human being. Alain de Botton uses the famous, wealthy, well-respected, high judge Ivan Ilyich of Tolstoy's novel as an example of how even powerful human beings long for compassion and a warm embrace. Ilyich was most agonized by the lack of affection people showed him. There came moments when he just wanted to be loved and compassionately embraced like a little child after going through so much pain. He yearned for hugs, kisses, and other forms of affection. He desired to receive the same level of attention given to ill children. At his advanced age and graying beard, indeed he knew he was a significant official. Alas, he wanted affection. Alain de Botton also refers to the cruelty of society. Individuals without status are treated harshly, their colorful personalities are ignored, and their identities are despised in society. More importantly, having low status ruins their self-esteem. He highlights the modern man's constant worry about falling into a lower social status with the following words. Confident people do not make fun of those around them. Perhaps snobbishness is motivated by hysterical fear. Deep fear is the source of haughtiness and arrogance. He advises us to ask the question, is it me, or is it my position that matters in society? Given the above views, let's ask, are our political preferences the results of our conscious choices arising from the fear Nietzsche draws attention to, or the groups we choose by subconscious, spontaneous psychological effects? Conformism. Conformism is exactly what Nietzsche despises and wants to debunk. Capitulation and conformity to social norms. The sick animal called human, which degenerates and shrinks into a herd animal, behaves with a herd instinct and adopts the judgment that society sees as good or evil without scrutiny. We can define conformism as the desire to be a good boy, not causing problems in our community. Anyone who tries to undermine the group's faith is immediately shunned and ostracized. We shall discuss excommunication and its consequences in the next chapter. Nietzsche illustrates the ease of conformism with the words, "How the world pleases our hearts, treats us in a friendly way, when we surrender to its will." According to Nietzsche, modern culture aims to transform the wild man into a more ordinary, more irresponsible, more Chinese, more Christian pet for the sake of a comfortable life. For him, the creature made regular, reliable, uniform, by severe sanctions and punishments of the society will have arrived at the end of history. As the human being was a social creature, let's see what psychiatrist Professor Errol Goka wrote in his book Turkish Group Behavior on the human need for conformism. Those who wish to live in a community must fit in with its present members. These psychological behavioral patterns are very resistant to the flow of history. Individual in such environment, finding it too comfortable to leave, rather than facing his conscience, pretends to submit to the system, hence avoiding his responsibilities. According to Kostika Bradatan, life is empty when you're alone because you're nothing. However, its eruptive, limitless energy fills you once you achieve a meaningful integration with the herd. The pack fills the emptiness you've fallen into, gives you greatness and dignity, gives meaning to your confused existence, and this collective spirit has a very dangerous power. A person's psychology that prevents him from harming a bird when he's by himself can change in an instant. That person can torch a government building and rob a liquor store because common sense turns into madness, caution into carelessness, and kindness into barbarism. In the following section of his article, Bradatan also quotes Elias Canetti. The individual caught in the swarm whirlpool is unable to break free from the group spirit. Even a murder that is fervently desired and shared by the herd can be carried out safely, if not outright encouraged. People receive joy and dignity from the herd that they cannot receive from family, friends, or the workplace. It acts as a highly toxic drug-like therapeutic agent on his psyche. Now, among these academic viewpoints, I would like to insert a memory of my own. My days as a teacher of English language at a high school in Ankara. It's 1976, a time when terrorism wreaks havoc in the nation. The atmosphere at schools is dominated by the revolutionary Marxist left. Students scroll the corridors with guns in their pockets. I am a light pinky leftist. I don't engage in politics. The school principal is a rightist from the MHP, and I'm an adored teacher. One day, while we were in class, we heard humming outside, and then someone kicked open the classroom door. "Guys, we're taking action. Everybody out," shouted a brat in a parka. Do my pupils adore me? Having that faith, I mustered the courage to tell the bully, "You stop at that door," I began, and then these words escaped my mouth. Dear young people, I'll take a moment. Think of sheep in a flock, and a shepherd dog disciplining them. Above the dog, a shepherd. Above the shepherd, an attendant. Then the owner whom the flock never sees. Here's your homework. Choose which you want to be in your life. Yet, remember the ancient proverb, one who leaves the herd is the prey of the wolf. Choice is yours. I vividly recall how my students left the classroom with ashamed faces. My frank talk in class was probably inspired by Nietzsche's idea of conformism. Who knows? We can apply conformist behavior to two dominant groups in Turkey, the conservative Islamists and the Kemalist, positivist, secularists. Both groups are very easy to enter and exit. Being a lumpen is sufficient. Entering these groups doesn't demand any mental effort. An intellectual, curious mind finds it's extremely difficult to fit in with these groups. The foundations of both are memorization and faith. A lumpen primary school dropout woman can be respected among her community if she gets rich, dyes her hair blonde, dons a two-piece formal black suit, and declares, "I'm a Kemalist." She is promptly regarded as modern, progressive, and Western. For the Islamist class, a headscarf is the code. On both sides, be it religious or secular moral values, what matters is loyalty to the groups. Given ladies' dress codes are more illustrative, I have given an example of it. Men's world is even more complex. Lifestyle is the key word. Lifestyle is an existential battleground. Western nations, particularly the USA, have elevated their lifestyle to the level of religion, and extremely sensitive in this regard. They try to impose their way of life on non-Western nations with fanatical missionary zeal. They want to see westernized cadres in position of authority in weaker countries. They view rulers not assimilated into Western lifestyle and world outlook as threats to their global order and want to remove them from power. Briefly, lifestyle is the neo-imperialist instrument for the interests of the West. The majority of elites from underdeveloped nations happily leave their traditions and conform to the Western way of life. And conformism in the cosmopolitan global hierarchy brings global class solidarity. They receive meager benefits from Westerners who refer to them as our useful idiots. Beyond psychological gratification, conformism returns in the form of economic welfare and social status. Examples of unethical commercial practices include secular, westernized corporations running advertisements on November 10th, mourning Ataturk's death anniversary. Traditional ones using religion to promote celebrations on religious holy days, etc. The innocent game begins in childhood, when the peasant kid selling Quran in the village for 1 lira moves to the metropole. He discovers that the Quran sale does not generate any revenue, and that Ataturk's portraits, busts, and books replace Quran as 10 times more profitable commercial material. Now a lumpen in transition, the kid quickly realizes the need to change his religion, tradition-based lifestyle into a secular, materialist lifestyle to make a living. The kid grows up and sells Ataturk's books for thousands of liras to lumpens like himself. Then the social atmosphere starts changing. Religious, traditional masses of the periphery start marching towards the metropoles. 90% peasant Turkey of 1920s becomes 93% urban in 2020s. Defiant, they resist assimilation into Western values, unlike their predecessors, who came in absorbable numbers before. Time goes on. Now the kids see that being Islamist also brings social statute and material gains in the metropole. As there was the millennial ruling elite before, now it was being challenged by the newcomers from the periphery. Modern conservative lifestyle conflict and cultural alienation of the two groups from one another shall be covered in more detail later. Just to note, despite what might seem to be a war of pious versus secular, the severe conflict born out of tectonic demographic shift is not a war of Islamist versus Kemalist, as late Professor Idris Kukukumar has pointed out. This conflict is not one between faiths. It is class warfare in the Marxist sense. It is the continuation of the historical schism between the ruling central Desherme class versus Reaya of the periphery. This time, the periphery claiming the state from the Desherme, the millennial alienated class, and the founding Turkmen. Now, we see the start of a bitter challenge forcing the masses to choose their sides and strictly conform to them. Social exclusion, excommunication. Herd morality, according to Nietzsche, was the social group conditioning defining what is right and wrong, and the blind instinct to obey this conditioning was conformism. Because they were lazy, desperate, or wanted to stay out of trouble, most people chose conformity in society. And the Übermensch of Nietzsche, the superior man, who questioned and rejected this conditioning, faced the threat of excommunication or attack from the herd. Psychiatrist Professor Nevzat Tarhan highlights social stigmatization. Social stigmatization or labeling is defined as the determination of a person's social status, including the placement of that person in a particular cultural pattern and the establishment of that pattern's norms. It is necessary to first create prejudice to categorize people. Stigma is used to control, categorize, diminish, or elevate certain cultural subgroups. Colloquial fashion among the Dejeunes, the phrase Yurdum insani, my peasants, is being used to dehumanize a particular cultural group. The consumption of lamakun, traditional folk music, and arabesque are all considered to be manifestations of primitive culture. To be modern, these must be given up. Western music is considered to be of modern taste. Same understanding is also reflected in clothing. Even how food is eaten with the right and left hands is defined by Western culture. Under cultural definition, all the above was summed up as modernity. Let's give an ear to the late Professor Errol Gungor now. The judgment of others is one of the severest intimidations that makes us cautious about moral behavior. Nobody can help but consider what other people are thinking when engaging in unethical behavior. One social psychologist asserts that our personalities are shaped by what other people want to see in us. Although not entirely accurate, this statement still expresses a profound truth. To fall out of favor, lose reputation, and to gain notoriety, to be despised, reprimanded, and especially to be mocked, scares us. The impact of public opinion is more noticeable in smaller communities. Any villager's immoral behavior quickly spreads to the entire village community. Such person would instantly lose all of his friends. People who find themselves in such situation leave and move into cities. Kostika Bradatan says that the society will not advance unless we eradicate the herd mentality, namely peer pressure from the community, partisanship, bigotry, fashion, intellectual imitation, and other kinds of isms. Given the lines above, it is clear that where there is a high degree of conformism, herd instinct, and fear of rejection, a society cannot advance, and that extraordinary individuals cannot emerge in a society. Is the mystery of our lagging behind for centuries hidden here? Being respected and loved is a fundamental human goal in every era of history and region of the world. Excommunication by the Vatican during the Middle Ages had a psychological impact that was worse than death. It is interesting to note that in excommunicating beliefs and practices that run counter to their own ideologies, modern secularist priests are equally as effective as Inquisition priests in their accusations. Sure, secularists don't set people on fire. However, they do not grant their adversaries the freedom to coexist in secular communities. This is especially so for the educated and well-to-do people who are accused by their peers of bigotry or regressiveness. Severe social and psychological destruction awaits them. Under such pressure, wannabe lumpens, who have not yet established a strong personality, are forced to Nietzsche's conformism. Effects and destruction of excommunication on human psychology have been researched by the universities of Georgia and San Diego. The following are the effects of social exclusion, per scientific research findings published in the journal Social Neuroscience. It interferes with the brain's normal function, makes it challenging to make correct decisions, leads to learning challenges, leads to behavioral disorders, inducing loss of willpower, escapism, i.e., alcoholism, professional and academic failure, incites hostility. How many of Nietzsche's Übermensch can endure these scourges? How many people would dare to drop out of their comfort zone? Imagine one who takes action against his Kemalist or Islamist group and dissociates from it. It is practically a social suicide. Noting the social foundation of human psychology, now let us get into the specifics. There are moral priests in every age and community who terrorize, particularly the elite. And Nietzsche's conformists are those who have the ability to join the elite class in society. Self-interest and laziness of the mind are crucial factors here. They lose their ability to think critically about the truths and taboos that Nietzsche refers to as herd morality. Like in Orwell's 1984, if they have doubts, the autocontrol mechanism in their brains turns them into fervent upholders of group ideals. We can observe this fanatic loyalty more in highly educated, yet unpolished, lowly cultured lumpens trying to join the upper echelons of the community. Remember the Ottoman proverb, Bir Sunradin Gorme, Bir de Geverdan Donme. Beware of the new money, and the zealous new convert to Islam. Fashion of modernity entered the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, what we call the Age of Tanzimat. Aficionados of fashion were the Ottoman intelligentsia, called Young Turks, aspiring to the French lifestyle. They stood up for the materialist, secularist, and Westernist way of life. We call their descendants White Turks today. To strengthen their cause, they use Ataturk as a tool against the traditional periphery. As we already said, the most fervent members of this group are those who are the least eligible to join and are in fear of being kicked out of the modernist community and pushed back to their underdog community, what we call the Black Turks. The early 21st century takes us into a new social formation. The massive tectonic demographic shift to metropoles enriched, educated, and encouraged peasants to retain their traditional values. Hence, they were not intimidated by modernists, rather, started challenging what they called the metropolitan, cosmopolitan, Western clones. We may call the new bourgeois as the pious bourgeois, emerging new elite. A new elite that competes with the establishment. They are like the pious Protestant merchants of Weber. They are swiftly modernizing, getting rich, bolstered by political power, and much stronger solidarity than the former elite. As such, they can discipline their new class with the cane of excommunication too. Before we wrap up our discussion on conformism, let us see the following passages about Turks who emigrated to Western countries. Another aggressive reaction in the early migration phase is the self-hatred and over-idealization of the new home. The nation left behind is denigrated as individual efforts are made to achieve a high social position at new land by working hard. These retrograde reactions are more prevalent among people coming from westernized metropoles of their home countries. To cope with the negative image of the immigrant in their new land, they do their best to assimilate and identify with their hosts, and try to cut their relations, especially with their lower-class nationals. However, these efforts mostly go in vain. The aspiring immigrant painfully realizes that no matter what he does, he will never be one of his hosts. Extraordinariness. Sapere aude. Dare to know. Professor Kostika Bradatan tells us that the Western philosophy was based on an eccentric Socrates, whose intellectual sport was mocking the herd, and that he paid for his social defiance and nonconformity with death penalty, and that extraordinary behavior calls for eccentricity, bravery, defiance, arrogance, doubt, and resistance on the one hand, yet it also draws regret, and in the end, revenge. He quotes André Gide, who also says that a great artist must be a nonconformist and a person who rose against the current of his time. An unconventional writer, philosopher, or artist should not only conflict with the values of society, but also its rituals and ceremonies. Conflicting with the priests of the system, he should risk being marginalized and excommunicated. The brave should also be aware that few will succeed, and that the intellectual establishment will prevail in most conflicts. And if they succeed, their ideas will be absorbed, normalized, then perverted, and, at best, transformed into academic subjects. Professor Bradatan lastly draws attention to his profession, the American academia, saying, "In academia, knowledge is cultivated for the purpose of conformity and to increase our powers over others, not to be dissenting." Political psychology. Let us start the section with a famous quote from the late Professor Idris Kukukumer. "Right is left is right in Turkey." I go a step further and assert, Justice and Development Party AKP of President Erdogan, is the People's Republic, Progressive Party in Turkey, and People's Republican Party CHP is the Conservative Ottomanist Party. Given that People's Republican Party CHP is the extension of the Ottoman Deşirme bureaucrats and which still shows hesitant, defensive, reactive reflexes of a dying empire, such is a natural definition. The most interesting anomaly is CHP thinks it is Republican and against Ottoman, yet it definitely is the representative of the military and civilian ruling elite of our day in Ottoman Deşirme tradition. No doubt, they indeed show hesitation and reaction to anything novel. Their life approach hails from the Ottoman Deşirme word istemizuk, we oppose, a reaction to reformers seeing them as ones to rock the boat of stability, the Asian mentality that left the empire centuries behind a rising Europe. And again, interestingly, AKP accepts them as Republicans, not Ottomanists, and itself as the successor of the Ottoman system. What a disorientation. AKP is the representative of the awakening vibrant periphery, breaking the chains of Ottoman Reaya, the ruled peasant class, eager to pick the gains of the republic Ataturk gave them. So, unknowingly, toppling the Ottoman ruling elite bureaucracy, AKP falls into the Republican wing of the Turkish political spectrum. Interestingly, just like their opposite CHP, they are not aware of their natural identity, which locates them in the Republican wing of politics against the Ottomanist CHP. One wonders when both wake up to their real identities. World intelligentsia also shares this cross-eyed schism about the Turkish political spectrum. It is necessary to look into the psychology that underlies this perplexity. Having discussed the individual and social psychology, as well as the sub-branches like conformism, exclusion, and extraordinariness, let us now look at the main topic of our book, which is how this psychological background influences people's actual political decisions. My guides for this section were the books of Erol Göka, Kaan Arsanoglu, and Martha Kotam. As the name implies, political psychology is a field that combines political science and psychology. It's the field of study that looks at how psychology influences political ideas, choices, and actions of both rulers and subjects, as well as how much genetics, environment, emotion, and reason play a part in it. Political and psychological elements such as our social identity, perception, self, values, conformism, behavior, social behavior patterns, emotions, motivation, race, nationalism, voting, ethnicity, genocide, war, leadership, persuasion, faith, excommunication, the herd subconscious, the role of the media, marginalization, stereotypes, motivation, ego, etc. Let's listen to Erol Göka first. The history of Turkey is one of the never-ending sibling quarrels. Just as they do today, Turkish communities of old times were split up into groups or segments identifying under certain symbols. Within these groups, one can observe members of every social class. The symbols of these groups, such as the flag, Ataturk, religion, Turkishness, Westernization, and secularism, which are frequently used in political discourse today, are a continuation of our society's historical memory. An attack on symbols is interpreted as an attack on people's identities because each segment's symbols serve as social representational tools and are crucial in the development of social identity. In contrast to class conflicts in the West, which are more realistic and involve negotiation and, ultimately, compromise, the struggle for symbols in our segmented society is more grave, and because they occur on an emotional level, segment conflicts centered on symbols are harder to resolve in terms of identity and personality. There is currently no solution for this segmented structure, to the point where one social group outweighs the other. Different social groups engage in constant sibling rivalry without resorting to a final, widespread use of force. Because they are aware, consciously or not, that if the issue is to be resolved violently, it will be necessary to obliterate the rest of Turkish society in order to triumph in the end. Therefore, they have only one chance left: cooperating with foreign powers against the other segment, or allied against foreign powers only before the exact moment of disintegration. Let's now attempt to explain the topic with subtitles. Why do people make politics? As you may recall, Aristotle referred to the human as zoon politikon, or the political animal. Politics will always exist where there is society. Force must be used in politics. The hierarchy starts where there is power. Remembering Plato, the rulers and the ruled are separated in the hierarchy. And when people actively engage in politics, a variety of motivations, including the desire for power, interest, lofty ideals, social superiority, and prestige, come into play.